Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out to talk about the upcoming 5-year capital improvement plan. This meeting is to provide an overview of the CIP, capital improvement plan process, explain what goes in, like what is specifically defined as a capital project, and then sort of some of the overall departmental requests that have occurred so far. It's important to note that this is a planning document. I'll touch a bit later that we can put projects together. It then gets approved by council, but it's still a planning document. It has to survive the budget process, which is dependent on revenues and a host of other constraints that we may have as we are working on the budget this spring. So I'd like to start things off, and I apologize, this text is small. A capital project is, in essence, a long-term, substantial project. It can take over several years, but typically we're talking buildings, we're talking land acquisition. Capital can also include heavy equipment or even passenger vehicles, but we tend to handle the smaller purchases that don't fit the typical charter capital request in the budget process. So this document again is for the bigger project. So a good example of how this program works is over a multi-year period. Year one could be the design of a project. Year two be the land acquisition needed to build the building, and then year three would be the construction, or the years after that would be involved with construction. So with that, this is in the county's charter, so we can't fill it full of just anything. It's specifically larger projects. So as an example of what the county has funded in this current fiscal year, which ran from July of last year to June, July of this year to June of 2019, we had a total of nearly $17 million in what we term capital coming out of our general fund. What this chart shows is in the left column what we put in general obligation bonds, and I'll touch on that as well. That is money we borrowed over a 15 or 20 year period to fund. And then on the right hand side, pay-go, that's usually covered by revenue that's come in that specific fiscal year, or money we have in our savings account. So just to touch on some things, the two big ticket items, I'll say the three big ticket items, we had the sheriff's office, we had the first half of that construction money put aside, and then ultimately the second half we're planning to fund this coming fiscal year. The Board of Ed had a series of projects that were funded in that $5 million. And then the airport, we've increased investment out at the airport, and that is going well. But this was this year, and we're here to talk about basically next year. So on that, the CIP is a cyclical process. So each year we're going to start in September. We get department input. Now that can be county departments, so that is what Public Works has requested or the airport has requested. It also includes agencies that we fund, so from the library, Warwick, Board of Ed, and so forth. So we get input from the various entities. If you go to the next area, we have the public input. This is where we are now. November, December is when we get input from the public, which ultimately leads to, after we've gone through the series of projects and requests, and we compare it to what we think we're getting in terms of revenue for the following year, it'll go to a submission in December to County Council. They generally have until February to approve, so there'll be a series of work sessions, and this is where you really get into the weeds about the specific projects. The department heads will come up before council during work sessions to discuss, as well as the outside agencies if council deems their projects worth arguing over or talking about. So that being said, there's going to be adequate time to talk about the specific, what bridge is being fixed or what hangar wants to be built out at the airport, and if the citizens feel that's a worthwhile endeavor. That being said, there's again plenty of time for input. This meeting's more about if you have a specific capital request to bring forward. We will turn the mic over to you shortly. After February, we then get more into the budget process. So again, this planning document, while it gets approved by council, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to survive the budget process. As we go to April, we submit, this is where budgets such as the salaries, benefits of county staff to the operating costs. So this is what it takes day to day for the upcoming fiscal year to run the various departments. Those will all get lumped together in one package to council to get approved. So then typically in June, that is when council approves everything, and if your project has made it through the entire process, money will be available in July and it can break ground. Now what the little diagram to the top left shows is that the money's available, it then gets managed by the specific departments, and then input from that. So sometimes like what's happened recently is with the tariffs, some of the heavy equipment and construction projects that involve lots of metal, say, have gone up in price. So we may have to put in the next year's CIP more money to complete that project. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes you do design in 1 year, you buy the land, you build with construction. Well, after the design process is done, sometimes you get new values. So you need to update what it's going to cost to fully build it. So again, this is a cyclical process. We look over 5 years at these larger projects. That doesn't mean a department doesn't look at, say, their fleet over a 5-year period because it's not included in this. It is, again, long-term planning for the big, significant projects. The next thing I'm going to touch on is while the CIP has projects, it also proposes how are they being funded, and I'm going to touch on some of the funding sources of these capital projects. The two main ones are bonding, which was touched on earlier with general obligation bonds, and then what we call pay-go, which is pay-as-you-go. So the first with bonding, we usually go to New York once a year and get what is sort of our credit score, a credit rating from the various entities that look at our financial position, our socioeconomic factors, and they rate the county each year. We then go to the bond market with the projects that survive this CIP process, and we get we go to the market to borrow money to pay for these projects. They're typically over 15 or 20 years, and they tend to be the big ones. So last year, as I touched on, the two main entities were the Sheriff's Department and the Board of Ed in terms of funding projects through a bond. Pay-go, again, is money that comes in through revenue from that year or our fund balance, so our savings account, so to speak. The other two funding mechanisms that typically come up involve grants through state and federal entities. Sometimes there's nonprofits, but they're not as common. And then what we call non-appropriated funds. This includes enterprise funds and what we call special governmental accounts. So grants, a good example is the airport. If we get on the federal FAA's, Federal Aviation Administration's project list, they pay 90% of our project's costs. So then the state chips in 5%, and then we chip in 5%. So your money goes a lot further when we leverage grants. Public Works is involved in the Bay cleanup effort. We get $200,000 a year, and we tend to make that double, if not triple, in terms of the amount of grants we use as matching. So grants make up a large part of some departments' funding. The Board of Ed, what the county puts in is typically getting matched by a larger amount from the state. So it's grants are an important part of how we fund some of these projects. With the non-appropriated funds, enterprise funds, the only true enterprise in the county is solid waste. They're able to fund their operating expenses and larger capital improvements. The other accounts like the airport and like this building here, the Civic Center, they generate enough money to pay for their day-to-day operations, but not the upgrades. So through the general fund, or by borrowing money or by pulling from revenue or savings, we're able to do larger projects. So we have some limits in terms of how we can borrow. So I'm going to touch on borrowing for the next few slides. We have a policy limit, and I'm going to touch on what we call P&I, which is our principal and interest payment. If you have a car loan, you're used to, what the monthly payment you make is part of it's going towards principal, part of it's going towards interest. And we have that for these larger projects where we're borrowing $10 million a year and so forth. So we have a limit that our debt cannot exceed 12% of the total general fund estimated revenue. An example is given below that for fiscal year, our total budget was a little over $140 million, and our principal and interest payment was $15.3 million. So we stayed under that 12% threshold. What it means is we have some more room to borrow, but as I touch on the next limit, you'll understand why we don't borrow more each year. So this slide's hard to read out there, but we'll make sure this presentation is available online for everybody. So per the county charter, our general obligation debt may not exceed 3.2% of the assessable base real property base, so property, real property, and then 8% of the county's assessable personal property. And I'll read it for you. When we looked at fiscal year 2019, 3.2% of the real property was $1.94 million. 8% of the personal property was $31 million, giving us a legal debt limit of $225.5 million. So that means we can borrow up to that level without being in violation of our charter. As of June of 2018, which is the last of our completed financial records, we were at $117 million. So we're a little over half of our debt allocation, and we have, more legal debt margin available. What the graph shows is going from 2019 out to 2046, that our debt, the dark green happens to be the actual old debt, and then the green happens to be the FY19 debt that was added. It rapidly drops off in the coming 5 years, and that is another policy we've had where we do not borrow. So each year when we go to borrow money, we do not borrow more than we're retiring. So every time we finish paying off, say, a $10 million bond, we're going to borrow $10 million or less in that next year, and that helps us stay fiscally responsible. So this is a good sign, and when we go to New York to get our credit rating, which then helps us get a better interest rate when we borrow, Wall Street likes seeing this type of behavior. So I want to touch on going out into the future, our future debt capacity. So we're limited in terms of our total borrowing by the policies I mentioned earlier. And we also have been issuing what I'll say relatively small debt. So you can put these projects out over 30 or 40 years, but you typically don't, if the lifespan of the project is less than the borrowing time, that doesn't make sense. If, again, to give a lower level example, if you're borrowing a car and you're paying for it over 10 years and it only has a 5-year life, you're still going to be paying for it after it's gone bad. So we tend to do 15 to 20 year borrowing rates on these projects. The next slide just touches on some history. When we went through the recession, the county had to cut back on several things, and they focused on public safety and education services. And one of the reasons why we have the savings account that we do is for the next recession, which is always around the bend. And we want to make sure we have the money basically in reserves to help when we have these key projects that still need funding and the revenues are not there. And I'll say the second bullet point touches on, when I show you the next slide, we've received requests from various departments already, and it's a competitive process. Nobody gets everything they want, and oftentimes we have to kick things out multiple years to make them work. And I'll apologize in advance because while the other slides are probably hard to read, this one's going to be even harder. However, I just want to touch on what we got from the various departments, and I can read some of them off. The Department of Corrections has asked for $751,000 in this coming fiscal year 20 CIP. Public Works has several accounts. There's engineering, there's roads, there's solid waste. They have a total of almost $4 million in requests and so forth. Warwick has a $2.1 million request. The thing with this, though, is while you think lump sums, this also includes what is provided by grants, like I mentioned earlier, federal and state monies. It also, in some cases, we look at public-private partnerships at the airport. Can we get somebody and enter into an agreement where they'll build the building for us and we give them cheap ground rent? So one of the things I want to point out is that while we haven't gone through and selected the projects yet, we wanted a time for public input in terms of any big projects that you all would be interested in. The total request from the departments to date is a little over $55 million. Now, of the proposed funding sources, we have a request of 16.7 roughly to be bonded. Now, historically, in the last few years, we've been in the $10 million, $9 to $10 million borrowing range. So that is something we're going to have to look at. 10.2 million is in pay-go. So again, that's revenue we bring in or from our savings account, the fund balance. We have 1.2 million roughly in what we call the enterprise and special governmental accounts. And then we have 27 million of that basically coming from grants. So slightly less than half we're looking at federal and state sources to fund these projects. Again, the time to really go into the weeds with these projects will be during the county council process. Each department will have time up at the mic and they can discuss what they're proposing, why they're in different years, and go into those weeds. So with that, we want to hear from you and would like to hear what you guys have to think in terms of necessary capital improvements. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
County Executive Mr. Culver and members of the County Council, thank you for the opportunity to present concerns regarding the Capital Improvement Program. My name is Diane Robinstein and my family lives in Hebron. We currently have a son in the 9th grade at Mardella Middle and High School. First off, I am thrilled to be here to personally thank you for the wonderful new track at Mardella. Not only do the students enjoy using it, but the whole community enjoys it as well. It is great to see so many friends and families gathered around it at different events. It is a great addition to our school community, and for that we thank you. Today I am here to share my concerns regarding the Capital Improvement Program as it affects Mardella Middle and High School. I have reviewed the CIP from the Wicomico County Board of Education's Planning and Construction Department, and the information is accurate. There is much needed and much to be done at Mardella. As you will see, or maybe as you have already read, the Capital Improvement Program does a great job of listing the many needs at Mardella, such as 4 major building systems which now have passed their useful life. Which includes replacement of the HVAC unit and the classroom unit vents, updating the lighting to make it adequate and add branch wiring to accommodate additional receptacles, replacement of plumbing, including fixtures, finishes, accessories, partitions in the restrooms, replacement of inefficient single-pane windows and doors, addressing identified architectural issues, redeveloping the existing parking lot that combines student, staff, and visitor parking, as well as student drop-off and pickup, and the bus loop, all with a single exit and entrance, and a special initiative to upgrade and modernize science classrooms. Additional details not found in the CIP include boilers and water pumps beyond their service life, corroded valves, pumps, and fittings due to extended use, deteriorating pipe insulation, ductwork that needs to be replaced or cleaned, many warped ceilings, ADA accessibility and compliance issues, building slabs at or below grade in some areas, grading around the portables that is inconsistent, resulting in pools of water after rain, dumpsters that are located at the front of the building, which on trash day also interrupts vehicular traffic, yet another addition to the already busy, crowded parking area. Lack of adequate musical instrument storage, or any storage for that matter, and poor classroom acoustics. Additionally, I would like to convey two areas of deep concern: the learning environment and safety. The failing HVAC system negatively affects the student learning environment. While it is known that the unit is beyond its useful service life, that it fails more frequently, and that parts are no longer available, its basic inability to function results in students having to wear their coats during class to keep warm, while in other classrooms students are too hot. The inconsistency in temperature directly affects students' ability to concentrate under the frigid and torrid conditions. This occurs both during the winter and summer and is not isolated to just one season. Also, since the unit does not function properly, moisture is retained in the ductwork, emitting a horrible odor in some areas of the building. I experienced this odor the night I attended teacher visitation at school. I was not able to visit one of my son's teachers, as the moldy odor coming from the classroom ventilation instantly overwhelmed my allergies, and I had to exit the area. Another challenge affecting the learning environment is the fact that Mardella is overcrowded. The staff does their best to accommodate all the students, but it comes at a cost to student learning. The gym is a good example. Classes are so large that not only is the gym used, but the lobby outside the gym is also used as an overflow class. My son has also spent numerous class periods inside the locker room as another area to house the overflow of students. Neither location is conducive to a physical education class, and on top of that, there is no cooling in the locker rooms. Due to the overcrowding issue, the cafeteria is also used as a pseudo gym, meaning after school, while the actual gym is being used by the junior varsity and varsity girls and boys basketball teams, the wrestling team has to hold their practices in the cafeteria. Mixing sweat and other airborne surface bacteria in an eating environment is of great concern, to many parents. Since the cafeteria is also used as the auditorium, gym, and theater, there is constant demand for this space, as you have many classes, clubs, and sports teams competing to use the space for concerts, class functions, meets, community events, practices, and more. Remember, Mardella is both a middle and a high school. So while the high school sports take precedence in the gym, the poor middle school girls and boys basketball teams can only use the gym when the high school teams have away games and meets, which significantly limits their opportunities to practice and host home games. Clearly, Mardella desperately needs more room. Lastly is the concern of safety. The Mardella Marching Band holds practices outside in the parking lot, which is a safety concern due to the overuse of the already tight space and a lack of significant lighting. When other events are going on at the school, parents of non-band students are not always looking out for marching band members in the parking lot. Another safety concern is that Mardella has no entrance vestibule, which means once a visitor is buzzed into the building, they really have free access to any part of the school. In other Wicomico schools, the entrance vestibule leads directly to the main office, and people must pass through the office area first before being able to access any hallways. This is not the case at Mardella. The office is down the hall from where people enter the building. The number of portables is another safety concern. Ideally, we would like to see those classrooms incorporated into the main building. While they are needed to help ease the overcrowded classes, they are a huge safety concern. Once that bell rings, we have students exiting and entering 9 different portable classrooms, making approximately 400 students, teachers, and staff exposed to danger 7 periods a day. With limited landscaping and inadequate fencing, access to the grounds can happen very easily and without warning. Access can come from the side or even behind the school, with a person not having to go anywhere near the school's front door. None of us like to think of this, but we cannot afford to ignore it. As a parent of a Mardella student, we are used to persevering through our school's challenges, but now that the actual learning environment is being compromised more frequently and student safety is becoming an increasing issue, we felt the need to convey these concerns directly to you. On behalf of Mardella Middle and High School, we appreciate your time and consideration in providing the necessary funding to continue design efforts to address our identified needs and concerns. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Culver. I'm Kurt Twilliam, the building principal of Beaver Run. We've met before. Nice to see everybody. I would like to come forward this evening and thank you for your continued support of education in Wicomico County and also with the Beaver Run project that's currently going on. It's moving along quickly, and it's going to be a beautiful building when it's hopefully finally finished. If those that are here supporting the project could please stand. Thank you. Now that we look towards the next phase in the process, we are asking for your consideration to confirm our financial commitment as a county to make the completion of the Beaver Run project possible. Benefits to our school community would be numerous, and these are a few of the high impact items. A safer campus for all students and staff with secure vestibules, technology capacity, which would be state of the art, which currently is very fractured. The unification of the Wicomico Early Learning Center and the Beaver Run main campus, a fully staffed wellness center for the health and welfare of our student body. This would actually be a new concept for our age group. Those facilities are already in place in a middle school and I believe in a high school. We're looking forward to having that also at the elementary school level. Adequate instructional and small group spaces throughout the entire building. The building would be ADA compliant. Currently it is not. We have 28-inch doors in some locations which are not wheelchair accessible. Heating and air for a cleaner, safer learning environment. Safer parking for families with dedicated areas for service vehicles and for buses. Mr. Culver, you've seen it firsthand that our facility is in disrepair and in dire need of replacement. And we're looking forward to construction and once again your consideration in providing the county's portion of the necessary funding for the continued project development. One thing to keep in mind is kind of on the comical side to some degree. Gas was 19 cents a gallon when Beaver Run opened up. Alice in Wonderland debuted that year, and that movie has been digitally remastered on several occasions. JFK was in the House of Representatives, and at that point, he still had 2 more years as a House of Representative member before he was even in Congress and on to the presidency. You will hear from a few of our parents coming up in just a few moments, but I do greatly appreciate all the consideration that you've given us so far, and as that next state commitment comes up and that we need to give as a county, I certainly hope you will consider full funding.
I'll be quick. I just think it would be nice to see improvement of the traffic flow at the intersection of Naylor Mill and Jersey Roads. If a roundabout or a signalized intersection could be considered there, it would be helpful. Thank you.
How y'all doing? How's everybody? Good evening. My name is Joseph Jones, and I'm a concerned parent. I have a son that's in kindergarten at the Beaver Run Elementary School. And as a concerned parent, it's sad when I ask my child, how was your day in school today? And he says, oh, yeah, I'm cold, or I'm wet, or I'm too hot. And the reason why is because Beaver Run has an open hallway or walkway that they need to access, so they go to the library or go to the cafeteria or go to the gym. Also, it's sad that the teachers have to switch on and off the light switch about 3 or 4 times just for the lights to come on. Bad wiring. So maybe it's because the school is over 60 years old and needs, dire repair. But my biggest concern, my real concern, is the safety of the school. The fact that an active shooter has easy access into Beaver Run Elementary School. And I say this because I'm a law enforcement officer. And when I walk down that hallway to my son's kindergarten class, there's a fence, excuse me, I'm sorry. There's a fence over here that is a locked with just a chain and a padlock. That's it. If an active shooter wants to get in, he just cuts the lock. And kindergarten class is right there. 4 of them. That's just 1, but 2. I don't, sorry. As a law enforcement officer, my heart went out to those kids at Sand Hill Elementary School. I don't want that to happen to our kids at Beaver Run. That's my biggest concern as a parent and also as a law enforcement officer. So, if you could, in your hearts, fix the school to where, they have good security systems. The building is secure. Your kids are safe. Don't have to worry about, I know not every school is 100% effective, but when you put up these deterrents, it makes it harder for them to gain access. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Lewers. My son attended Beaver Run 8 years ago, and my 6-year-old daughter attends there now. Beaver Run has been a great school for many years. However, in comparison to other schools in our community over the last decade, the overall exterior and interior appearance of Beaver Run has declined. The new school that is being proposed is so needed in this community. The new building will offer bigger classrooms, heating and air, more security, spaces dedicated to special education, speech therapy, and not to mention the sense of community this will bring. I like Dr. Hanlon's vision points. The new building will greatly improve conditions impacting student learning. Individual enclosed classrooms for safety and acoustical control, bright and inspiring courtyards surrounded by flexible classrooms. The new building will provide modern and efficient heating and air conditioning systems. It creates a sense of community. This includes a community wellness center, a gymnasium, a cafeteria, and media center. The new design allows the school to have performances on site instead of at other locations. The new site access and placement of the new building positively influences students, staff, and visitors. The design of the parking, bus, and parent drop-off is efficient and keeps all 3 functions separate. Extensive stormwater management improvements in raising the building slab will keep water out of the new building. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you? My name's Renee Roach, and I am a parent of a student at Beaver Run. He's in 1st grade. I have an older son that spent 3 years there, and I myself went there 27 years ago. And I can vouch that since when I was there 27 years ago, nothing has changed. Very little improvements have been done. Also, when my older son was in kindergarten, the plumbing was bad. That was the year they had to have the porta potties. And as a mom with my first child going into school, that was very stressful. The school still has, some kind of plumbing issues, bad water that they're dealing with. Beaver Run is also a Title I school with an 83% POB level. And these are the children that we need to focus on as far as stability. These children should feel safe and comfortable coming to school. And I feel that by combining the Welk and Beaver Run into one school, that this is one less transition these kids have to worry about. Kids at that age don't understand new buildings, new teachers. They want to see familiar faces, other kids they've seen, know where they're walking down the hallways, reducing stress. That's also important. Like, I'm so thankful. Half these teachers back here, I've known them for years. Like, we're friends on Facebook, and I'll talk to them in public if I see them. And I want my kids to have that too. Like, they get excited when my older son sees them, and he's like, oh, hey, yeah, remember me? So, you know, these relationships are important, and that's what our kids are basing their education on. Right now, Beaver Run cannot host events like Christmas concerts, spring concerts. We have to go other places, not where the kids have practiced. Again, that goes back to the whole uniform and them being comfortable. Like, they've practiced in one building, and then all of a sudden you're uprooting them and saying, hey, perform here. That adds to their nerves, their stress levels. The car rider line at Beaver Run. Whoa. I have been the car rider mom for the last 5 years, and it has never gotten better. You know, if you are picking your child up at 3:30 and your child's not a car rider, you're going to get blocked in. It happened to me the other day. I signed my child out early, and we couldn't even leave early because I was stuck in my parking spot. I couldn't get out because the car rider line, and the car rider line also spills out into 346, blocking traffic on Alderson City Road for, you know, non-parent pickup people. So it's definitely, it's bad in there, and I definitely think the new proposed building being farther back and able to open all that up will make a huge impact safety-wise as well. You know, when there's that many cars in that tight of a spot and kids walking across, it's a lot of chaos. It really is, and it's not safe for the kids. We have to have, you know, teachers standing outside walking kids to their doors of their cars, you know. It's just not, it's not an ideal situation. School security is also a huge issue, as some other parents have said. It's not something you want to think about, especially when it pertains to your own child, but those breezeways are not safe. They're not conducive to weather conditions in the wintertime. The kids are exposed to elements, and some of these kids, I've been on field trips where in 40-degree weather, kids are in shorts. Like, not all these children are being sent to school with the appropriate clothing that they should have. So that's definitely an issue with them walking through the breezeways. And then safety is a major concern. As the man before me said, when you are buzzed in at Beaver Run, there's 2 entrances and then a long hallway to the office. Like, anybody could just go right down that hallway, buzz right past the office, and be in the school. You know, it's extremely dangerous, and I don't like to think of the fact that something could happen to my child or anybody's child, any child in general. So that's all. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. Bill Houlihan, and I'm here to speak to you about the roof replacement at Westside Intermediate. I have 2 girls there in the 3rd grade. I understand that the original roof was built 20 years ago, and it has been leaking for the past 5 to 10. And currently there are tarps on the roof to keep water from coming in. I'm concerned about the cost water into the building will create. I understand that a copier had to be moved because water was leaking on it. Damage to computers, etc. I know we can see a ceiling tile, but I think the risks are a lot greater. I have concern about the health and safety of the children and the staff. Leaking water in a roof cavity, a warm roof cavity, will breed mold, which will affect the air quality inside the school. If we had an occasion of a slip and fall and a serious injury, the associated costs with that would be very great. Today, the recession is over. I'm in the construction business, and we're seeing inflationary pressure on materials and labor. Federal policy to counteract inflation is to raise rates. So the cost of borrowing is going to increase, the cost of materials, the cost of labor, the longer that we wait. So I would ask to please fund this project as quickly as possible. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Culver. My name is Chris Nunzi, and I'm the principal at Westside Intermediate. I want to piggyback on what Mr. Houlihan just shared regarding Westside Intermediate School. I'm here tonight to ask for the funds to replace the roof, the school roof. It's very important. The existing roof is well over, it's 20 years old. Over the course of the years, we've been plagued with numerous leaks as well as internal damage to the building. It's very difficult to put technology and things into a building when you have a leaking roof. The patches that have been done are beyond what can be done at this point. Right now, when I left the school, we made sure the tarps were in place and the buckets were out. I know tomorrow morning when we hit there, that's going to be the first thing to do is empty the buckets and make sure everything's okay. It's not the way to run a school as the principal. My goal is to be there for the instruction and for the safety of those children. We've had slips because of leaks. You can't see them, they just happen. A leak can be over here, but the spots are dripping down over here. You know how that works. So I can only ask that you go ahead and fund this request for the school. Any consideration will be greatly appreciated, not only by the staff, myself, but for the children and the families at Westside. Thank you very much.
Good evening, County Executive Culver, Mr. Young, Mr. Strasburg. Let me begin, Donna Hanlon, Superintendent. Let me begin by thanking you for the support that you've provided for our capital projects over the years. You know how very happy most recently the West Salisbury community is with that amazing facility. And we do have ongoing needs, so thank you for the opportunity for our members of our school communities to be able to provide feedback this evening. You've heard from 3 of our schools because we limited our priorities to you this year in our capital funding request to those 3 schools as our top priorities. You've heard from them. You don't need to hear from me again specifically about why those are such pressing needs. They did a wonderful job of describing those needs to you. And also the gentleman who spoke about delaying and what we've had these conversations when we've met personally. So any delay would just prolong, obviously, or exacerbate the problems that are occurring in our schools and also result in increased need for funding. So I just want to support what they've said and ask you for your continued support with the FY20 Capital Improvement Fund requests for the Board of Ed. Thank you.
With that, thank you, Dr. Hanlon. I appreciate that. I would like to, again, express the fact that we want to try to get as much done as we can this year and the years to come. Hearing it from you, the parents, and from the teachers who work there mean a lot to us. Let me give thanks to Kurt Twillick last year who called me about Beaver Run and asked me to come out, and Dr. Hanlon met me. I believe, I can't remember, Bruce, you were there or not, but there's several of you were there to, I don't know, to browbeat or just to show me what was needed. And the fact of the safety issue was a main concern of mine, having the hallways and the breezeways. I went to Y High when it used to be just breezeways, and this was the same thing that Beaver Run was set up as. So I understand your concern, and those were that, and the fact of the water problems that we're having out there when high tide hit Ocean City Road caused me to go ahead and put that in the queue to get done. So that was due to your teachers and your principals who brought attention to us. Mardella, I do know about some of the issues. I didn't know about the mold or I'll say the mold, the bad air coming out. So we'll try to help out as much as we can do on that. At least put a little Band-Aid on it right now. We have so much money. I was looking in here, they're calling for a $40 million school. That's a lot of money. We're looking, several schools here in a row. So that was done. West Side Intermediate, I've got an extra tarp so I can get down there, Bill, if that'll help you out. But, I think that you're right. We can leverage our money for West Side very well in the sense that I think it's 200 and some thousand we put in and the state puts the rest of it in. That's a good use of money when we can do that. So a lot of these projects are needed, and they haven't fallen on deaf ears. We do very much want to try to get them up. I can't explain what happened before I became executive, but for many years, things were neglected. And we have done what we can do. You're aware that we finished up Bennett High, we did Bennett Junior, and we've done West Salisbury, just in my short 4 years so far. So we're going to continue along those lines and do everything we can, but it's a process, and as Weston says, we are limited by certain things in the charter as to how much we can borrow. And during this past election, you heard that we have a lot of money in the accounts. We do, but some of it is spoken for, some of it is earmarked for pensions, that type of thing. So we will take a hard look at that and see what we can leverage out of that money and to go from there. But we've got to keep a good sound base so that when we go to New York, because we are such a small county, when it comes to borrowing in New York style money, we've got to be strong. And that's the only reason we're going to be able to get the money that we need to. So we are paying down as quick as we can, and that will help everybody, but we will look at it very seriously and try to leverage what we can. So I appreciate your honesty, and Dr. Hanna, I may say this is one of the best groups the Board of Education's ever brought forward. So thank you. Weston, you have anything to close up with?
No, I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. Hanlon said, that the request that the Board of Ed submitted included all three of those schools as their top priorities. They were the top three. So, you know, we've heard you loud and clear on those, and again, we're going to have to sit down and try to work out all the requests that are we have this year in front of us, and you know, it's part of the process. Again, when this gets handed over to council, there'll be plenty of time to talk about it leading up to their approval in February, and then there'll be additional time to talk about it in the budget process, because again, this is a planning document, and you know, it's ultimately going to rely on council approving the funding request made by the executive's office. So with that, if does anybody else have any other projects to add?
One quick thing, we didn't introduce, this is Wayne Strasburg, Director of Administration. And Weston this year is the Deputy Director of Administration, and he's taken over some of the parts that Wayne used to do. So we believe in succession planning, so Weston's up this year. It's his term. So.
Short straw.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming. We appreciate your time and your comments tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening.